So I live in South Carolina in the United States, and my address is... Do you really think I was going to give you my address? Stop being creepy. South Carolina is typically a pretty warm state. It's like in the 80s and 90s in the summer. It's very humid, it's hot, but for a couple of months a year, it's a little bit colder, usually around January and February. And today it is 34 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Now for my Celsius people, that is 1 degree, or 1 point something degrees. For somebody like me, I grew up in upstate New York, so I was used to the cold for a very long time, but I've lived in the South now for about 15 years, and that's cold. That is really cold. So in honor of the cold weather outside, I want to take this still image here, and I want to actually bring it to life. I want to make it more dynamic. So we're going to actually add some smoke to the chimney coming out. We're going to add some snow falling. We're going to add me walking through the scene, and we're going to add some movement to the scene so it makes it look like this still image is actually in a video and it comes to life. Now to do that, we're going to use Final Cut Pro, but we're also going to use motion. We're going to use motion to create the smoke, and we're going to create the snow with motion, and then we're going to bring those things into Final Cut Pro to actually finish editing the video. And like someone said in the comments before, there are people who jump in and there are people who dive in. So I hope that you're excited to get started, because we're about to dive in. Now the first thing that we're going to do is open up motion, because we're going to build the smoke that's coming out of the chimney and we're going to build the snow in motion. So to do that, we'll just go through and open motion up. And then when motion opens up here, we're going to want to create a generator. Now the generator is going to be used to generate the snow. We're also going to create a second generator to create the smokestack. So the first thing that we'll do is create the smokestack. So we're going to click on Final Cut Generator. We're going to make sure it's in 4K, and we're going to set it to 60 frames per second. And then we're going to set it to 10 seconds. And then we'll open this up and dive into the actual project. Now creating the smokestack in motion is actually super simple because there are already particle emitters that will handle a lot of the smoke stuff that you might want to do in motion. So we're going to grab particle emitters here, and then we're going to go over to smoke, and then down here we're going to choose the black smoke particle emitter, and we're going to pull that into our project. And now over here you can see that if I were to play this, you can see now that the smoke is rising, that it's doing exactly what it would do as if it were coming from a chimney. However, the smoke is too dark, so we want to actually lighten this up because we don't want it to be super dark or it'll just look like coal or some like weird power plant kicking out black smoke. We want to have that kind of like whitish, grayish looking smoke that would typically be coming out of a house. So we're just going to click on the black smoke emitter here, and we're going to go over to our inspector, and then down here under the color over life setting, we're going to click on that. We're going to click on that initial color over here on the left, and then we'll click on this and we'll choose a different color. Now the color that we want is going to be kind of somewhere more in this lighter gray area. So I'm just going to click over there, and then you can see that it automatically changed the starting color of my smoke. And then over time, as it travels through time, it's going to get slightly lighter until it eventually fades away. And so now that we have that color change, let's just take a look at what it looks like here. All right, and this is good. This is exactly what I want it to look like. Now, the only thing that we actually have to do with the smoke now is we don't actually want the smoke to build in like this. We actually want to start our animation somewhere around like here, where the smoke is actually already billowed out and it's already just kind of flowing. So what we want to do is we want to essentially take the group here, and we're going to rename that group. Now that I'm over here, we're going to call this smokestack, like that. And we're going to grab that group, and we're just going to start about here, and we're going to pull this all the way back to about here, like that. And so what that's going to do, it's going to start the smoke already extended out as far as it's going to go, and then it will just continue to billow out like it would out of a chimney. We can just click on the edge of the group here, and then we'll just pull this out to the length of the animation. We'll just kind of pull it out a little further, like that. And so now we can just kind of start our animation here, and we can watch, and the smoke will just continue to billow like it's going to be coming out of a chimney, okay? And that's exactly what we want. We just want the generator to be kicking out smoke and just kind of making it look like it's just continuously coming out of a chimney like this. Okay, and now that we have that complete, we don't need to publish any properties or anything like that because the smoke is just going to have one function. It's just going to sit in the background and it's going to be the chimney smoke. So we're actually just going to go up to File, we're going to save this, and then you'll pick a category that you want to put it in. In my case, I'm just going to put it in the embered in category. I'm going to rename this to smoke stack like that, and I'm going to click publish. Now I've already created a generator that has the name smokestack before, so I'm just going to replace the one that I have, but you should not get the replace dialog, so you shouldn't have to worry about that. You're just going to save your generator in whatever category you want, and now that we've saved it like that, we can actually open that up in Final Cut Pro. But before we do that, let's create the snowstorm. So again, we're going to open up Motion. We're going to create a new generator here. We're going to make sure that it's 4K. We're going to set it to 60 frames per second and make sure that it's 10 seconds. We want it to match what we just created with the smokestack. And so we're going to open that up. Now, creating the snowstorm is also just going to be using an emitter, but we're going to create our own custom emitter here. We're not going to use one of the default ones. So we're just going to first create a circle that's going to be just kind of our initial particle. So we're going to go down here, we're going to choose the circle tool. I'm going to hold down shift so that I can actually get a perfect circle like that. And I'm just going to make a circle about that big. The size doesn't really matter at all. And I'm going to select the particle really quick. I'm just going to go over to the inspector. I'm going to go to my properties, and then under the position, I'm just going to reset that parameter so that the circle ends up in the center of the screen. It really doesn't matter at all if it's in the center, but I just want it to be in the center of my world here. Now, with the circle selected over here, we are going to want to create an emitter now. So we'll go over here to our Make Particles button, and we're going to click on that, and that's going to create an emitter for us. And this whole group, we're going to rename that to be Snowstorm. So this is going to be our snowstorm group, and now we have an emitter in here that's going to emit particles. And if we were to just play this now, you can see that it's just starting to kick out particles everywhere, right? It just has no regard at all for the fact that this is snow. It doesn't care. It's just kicking particles everywhere. So what we want to do is we want to change the actual shape of this emitter. Right now it's a point, and so everything is kind of being emitted from that one point. But we want to change it over here to line. And now what that's going to do is it's going to create a line that all of the particles are now being emitted from, okay? And we actually want to change the width of this line, because if we go back here to the beginning, the line is actually only going to be 200 pixels wide. Right now it's 100 in the negative, 100 in the positive. We want to change this so that it takes up the entire width of our 4K screen. And since it's 4K, it's around 4,000 pixels. We're going to change it to negative 2,000 so that it kind of goes left. And then we're going to change this to positive 2,000 so that it goes right. And so that if we were to start to play this now, you can see that it's actually taking up the whole width of the screen. And we're going to want to position this up above the top of the screen, because if we were to just kind of slide up here, you can see currently our emitter is just in the middle of the screen, and snow is not just going to fall in the middle of the world, right? So we want to actually put the emitter up here above the screen so that as it starts to fall, it looks like it's falling from the sky. So we're going to click on our emitter, we're going to click on properties here, and then we're going to set the Y property here to be about 1400. Like that. So now it's up above the actual screen, and if we started to play this out, you could see that very, very slowly particles will start to fall from the sky. And actually, when I'm looking at this, I think that I want to make sure that it starts off initially as wide as the screen. And so I'm going to click on the emitter again, and I'm going to change this actually from negative 2,000. We'll make it negative 2,500, just to make sure that it spans across the entire width of this area, like that. And so now if I kind of play it really quick, it's actually taking too long. I'm not really crazy about how long it's taking, so I'm going to actually click on the emitter again here, go to properties, and instead of 1400, I'm going to make this 1350. So just that it sits a little bit lower, but it's still up above the screen when it starts. Okay, so we're gonna make a couple changes here to the emitter itself. We're gonna click on that and go to the emitter. First of all, I'm gonna click that 3D box there because I want things to be on the X-axis, the Y-axis, and the Z-axis. So I want it to kind of happen in 3D space. Now, I can also change this from being local 3D, which is going to be faster, to a global 3D, which is going to be better. It's going to look better. But for now, we'll keep it at local 3D, and then right before we save this actual file and we send it over to Final Cut Pro, we'll change that over to global. I'm just going to put some numbers in here that I've kind of experimented with prior to this, but you can, of course, just go through and play with numbers and try to get this to look different in different ways. But the numbers that I've decided on are this. We're going to set the latitude to be 1.4. We're going to set the emission longitude to be 278. We're going to keep the emission range at 360. And then down here in birth rate, I'm going to set that to be 100. I'm going to set the birth rate random to be 50 because we want some randomness in here, right? We don't want things to just happen uniformly because nothing in nature does, right? In nature, things are random. They happen in kind of various different patterns and stuff. So we want to add some randomness in here. And then the initial number, we're actually going to just pull that all the way up to 100 so that we start off with a lot of particles. We're going to change the life of the particles to be 7.6. We're going to set the life randomness to be 30 so that we can add some randomness to how long each of the particles survive, because in a real snowstorm, your snow is not going to all start and end at the same time. It's going to be happening in random intervals. We're going to keep the speed at 100, but we're going to set the speed random to 346. And then down here at the bottom, we're going to change the scale of our particles because our particles are just too big right now. So we're going to change the scale down to 10%. And then we're going to change the scale random to just 5. And the reason I'm using a small number like 5 is because if I had jacked the randomness of the scale way up, then the particles might get really huge, and that's not going to be the case in snow, right? We want them to be tiny and small. So we're going to use just a small amount of randomness for our scale. And then if you look down here toward the bottom, you can see that we have a particle source. The particle source is this circle that we have here, okay? And so if we were to actually start to play this now, you can see that the particles that are falling are just a whole bunch of the little circles, okay? Now, obviously snow is not always going to be circles, and so we want to kind of give ourselves some options here. So what I want to do is create a few different shape options for our snowflakes. So to do that, we're actually going to use something that's built into Apple Motion. We're going to go down here to our content and we're just going to search for snowflakes down here. I'm just going to put snow in the search here. That's going to show us some snowflakes that we have here. Now these are just built in and they're already animated, so I think it's kind of cool how they just kind of animate as they fall. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all 3 of these and I'm going to pull them over here into my project. And I'm actually going to create a new group over here and I'm going to call this group shapes because this is where all of the different shapes for my snowflakes are going to go. So I'm going to pull all 3 of these inside of that group, and I'm actually going to pull the circle, which is this shape, inside of that group as well. We're not going to pull this circle here out because that needs to be part of the emitter. Now, you can see that all of a sudden, all of these objects are just sitting here in the middle of the screen, and we don't want that. So we can actually just hide those for now because they are not going to be actually visible or relevant to us anymore. These are just going to be the shapes for our snowflakes. Now, if I click on the emitter and I go back to the inspector and I click on the emitter tab here, this is all going to center around this particle source, okay? So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create something called a rig. Now, a rig basically allows us to be able to choose different options and then have a different setup for each one of those options. And so to do that, the first thing we're going to do is go over here and we're going to go to Object and create a rig. Now, when we've created the rig, it gives us the option to create a slider, a pop-up, or a checkbox. And each one of those is kind of a method for choosing between things, right? And so in our case, we're going to want to use a pop-up. And basically what it's going to be is just a list or a drop-down list of different options. And so in here, we have 3 different snapshots that are created for us automatically. So I'm just going to rename this one to Snowflake 1. I'm going to Click on that, go to the snapshot 2, rename it to snowflake 2, like that. Click on the third one, rename it to snowflake 3. And then I'm going to give myself a couple more options. So we already have a circle. So with snowflake 3 selected here, I'm going to hit the plus, and that's going to create a new snapshot underneath it. And I'm going to say circle, because now I have the ability to add my circle as an option here. And then finally, with circle selected, and the reason I'm telling you which one to select, because if you had, like, for example, snowflake 2 selected and you hit the plus, when you create that, it's going to put it between snowflake 2 and snowflake 3. So we don't want that. We want to make sure you have the last one selected. You're going to hit the plus, and then this one is going to be a custom option. So I'm going to click on that and type custom like this. And so now we have our 3 built-in snowflake shapes. We have our circle in case we just want to use like circles, or we have the ability to add a custom option. Now we've handled 4 out of the 5 shapes. We basically have all of our snowflake shapes here and our circle, but the custom option is going to be whatever custom image you want to put on it. And so to do that, we need to create something called a drop zone. So we're going to create the drop zone, we're going to drag it inside of our shapes over here, and we're going to click on that, and we're going to go over to its properties, like this, and then we're going to change the scale of our drop zone down to 10%. And you can see now that the drop zone is a rectangle, and we don't want a rectangle, because if we were to put an image of a snowflake, that image is probably going to be a square. So we really want to change this to a square. The reason it's a rectangle is because it is being cropped. So if I show that, you can see that it's being cropped on the bottom and on the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of the crop on both sides. And so now the actual drop zone is a square. And so now what we have is a place to actually put any image we want. And so now over here on our rig, first of all, we're going to rename that rig. We're going to rename it to flake shape. And you can see that when I renamed it here, it renamed it over here as well. That's going to be important because this is going to be the property that we actually publish and make it visible in Final Cut Pro. So we want to name it something that makes sense. And so this is now our flake shape. So what we need to do now is we need to add a property to this rig that we're going to give a different value to under each one of these drop downs. And the property that we're going to use is going to be over here in our emitter. It's going to be our particle source. What we're going to do is click on this little arrow over here. We're going to click add to rig, go over to rig, and then add it to our flake shape. So we're going to click on that. And now if we go back to our rig here, you can see that the particle source is available here. Now under snowflake 1, we're going to select that first. We're going to hit this start button for the edit mode. And when you're in edit mode, you can actually set the value of this particular property. So since we have snowflake 1 selected, we're going to grab snowflake 1 and drop it in there. And now snowflake 1 takes on that value. We're going to stop rig edit mode, and then we're going to change this to snowflake 2. Same thing, start rig edit mode, pull this out of the way, drop snowflake 2 into there. Okay, and you just keep repeating this for each one of the different values that you have. So we're going to start it, move over here, snowflake 3, okay, stop the rig, and then we're going to choose circle, start the rig, drop our circle in here, even though it's already there. We're going to stop the rig. And then finally, we're going to choose custom, and we're going to start the edit mode, and then we will drop the drop zone into here, and then stop rig edit mode. And now that we've created the rig, we want to actually add this to our published properties. So on the flake shape right here, you're going to hit the arrow, and you're going to hit publish. And then if you click on project at the top of your project window here, and you go over to project right here, you'll see that flake shape is now available here. And if we drag this up to the top, we can now choose between the different flake shapes that we have. So we can choose snowflake 1, we can choose snowflake 2, snowflake 3, circle, and custom. And then with custom selected, we're able to drop whatever we want onto this drop zone here, and that will allow us to create whatever snowflakes we want. We're probably not going to use a custom one in the rest of this video, but I just wanted to kind of show you how to do that so that you could create your own little generator here that's generating a snowstorm for you and then reuse it in a bunch of different contexts in Final Cut Pro. So at this point we have our shapes, so those are good. We have our rig in place, and now what we want to do is go back to our emitter here. And so basically what we want to do now is we want to publish some of these parameters here. And I'm just going to publish the ones that we've actually set. So I'm just going to go here, click on publish, for the randomness, publish, initial number, publish, life, publish, randomness, publish, speed, publish that, speed randomness, publish that. We're going to go to scale, publish that. And then finally we have our scale randomness, and we'll publish that. And then if we click on project up here, you can see now we have all of these different options that are going to allow us to customize how this actual snowfall looks when we're using it in Final Cut Pro. We're almost done with this generator. So there's a few other things that I want to add, because if we just set this back to Snowflake 1 and we play it and we watch it happen, it's just a little bit too perfect. I just noticed that when I created all those shapes, the playhead must have been way over here and they all got created here. So we're just going to kind of click on those and drag them all back to the beginning here. And we're going to go back to the beginning with Snowflake 3, back to the beginning with Snowflake 2, and then back to the beginning with Snowflake 1 here, like that. And the drop zone is going to just be available for the whole thing as well. And okay, so now everything's back in time where it's supposed to be. And you can kind of see, like, if we play this like this, everything's just kind of a little bit too perfect. We want to kind of add a little bit more randomness to this, and we want to add a little bit more gravity, right? Because it's going way too slow, right? We don't want it to do that. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to click on my emitter here, and I'm going to go up to behaviors, and I'm going to choose simulation, and I'm going to choose gravity. The gravity is going to make it so that it will pull down more on the actual snowflake. If I were to take this number here and I were to bump it up to like 800 like that, then you can see as I play it, everything's going to kind of fall faster, right? Gravity's pulling harder on the snow. So we're going to increase that number to 800, and we're actually going to publish this property as well so that we can have control over that in Final Cut Pro. And then I'm also going to want to click on the emitter here and go to my filters and choose blur, and then choose the Gaussian blur. And the reason I want to add that is because if I don't add some blur to this, then the snowflakes will probably look too perfect and too crisp. Like, so being able to just kind of add some blur to your snowflakes is going to add to the realism. And so now that we have that actually available to us here, we'll set the amount to be 30 by default. And then I'm just going to click on this arrow and publish that parameter as well. And now that I've added that property in, the acceleration property here looks a little weird to me. So I'm just going to rename that to gravity strength, like that, so that it makes more sense. I'm going to change amount here to blur amount so that that also makes more sense to me. And the rest of these I think can stay the same, and I think that's probably good. And now that I have my actual properties in here, I just want to add a little bit more randomness to this. I'm going to click on the emitter here, and then under my behaviors in simulations, I'm going to add some random motion to it as well. And I'm not actually going to publish any of those properties. I'm just going to make a few changes to them, and then we'll leave it that way, and we won't actually add any control over that. I'm going to change the amount here to 42 because it is the answer to life, the universe, and everything. I'm going to change the frequency to 1.6, and I'm going to change the noisiness to 0.8. Okay, and that's just going to, again, add some randomness, make it so that it looks more like nature would look. So there's only a couple more things I want to do here. So basically I want to go through and pick a few of these properties, and I'm going to go in and add a parameter behavior, and I'm just going to randomize it. And I'm just going to leave it at the default values. So I'm going to go back to my emitter here, and then I think I'm also going to pick maybe longitude, and I'm going to add a parameter behavior here and randomize that. And then one more time, let's just go back to that emitter, and then I'm going to pick the emission range here, and I'm going to add randomization to that. And basically what's happening now is I'm just kind of adding a bunch of different kind of randomness to it so that it looks a little bit more realistic. And so if we go back and watch this now, you can see that the snowflakes are kind of falling more randomly, more kind of all over the place, more like they would in nature. Ignore the fact that they kind of like have these sharp snowflake looking edges. We're going to improve that when we get it into Final Cut Pro and make it look a little bit more realistic. But basically, this is all we need. The only other thing I want to add, I want to be able to decide if it's just going to start falling from the sky like this, or if it's just going to start off being in the scene completely 100% taking up the scene. So what I want to do is I want to find the spot where the actual snow has covered the screen completely, like that. And so then I'm going to create what's called a build-in marker. So I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to go add marker. You could also just hit the M key and that would create the marker for you. I'm going to move my playhead out of the way here and I'm just going to double click on that marker and it will open up the edit marker panel, and then we can in here under type, we'll choose build in optional and then click OK. What that's going to do is if I go over here and click on properties, now there's this checkbox here that if it's checked, then the actual animation will start back here where it has to actually go through the process of building in and the snow is going to fall from the top. If it's unchecked, the snow is now going to start from that marker, so the snow will just already be covering the screen when it starts to play. So that's just another useful option, and it just gives us the ability to kind of have more control over this snow when we have it in Final Cut Pro. And now we've created the generator for our snowstorm. So all we have to do now is go up to File, and we're going to Save, and then again we're going to choose the Embered In category here, and I'm going to rename this to Snowstorm, and then again I'm going to publish it. I already have one, so it's going to ask me to replace it. You won't have one, so you don't need to worry about that. Now we've actually saved the generator, and now we can dive into Final Cut Pro and we can actually build out this project. Now, phase 2 of this project, we're going to open up Final Cut Pro. So I've opened up Final Cut Pro here and I've pulled in the actual assets that I'm going to need here. So the first thing that I want to do here is I want to actually drop my background image into the scene. So I'm just going to hit the E key and that'll put that on my primary storyline. And so now I can actually use this as my background to add all of the different parts. The next thing that I want to add is the smoke that's coming out of the chimney. So I can go up here to my titles, and if I go to my generators and I click on that Embered In folder, you can see now I have this smokestack generator, and that's the one that we created over in Motion. Now, if I want to just connect this to my primary timeline, I can just hit the Q key, and that's going to connect it to my primary storyline wherever my playhead was. I'm just going to pull that back. Now I'm going to put the playhead over here so I can see it, and you can see that my smoke is kind of just sitting in front, so I want to move that around. So I want to click on my transform tool over here, and I'm just going to move this over here so that it's kind of like right above there. And I'm actually going to zoom in just a little bit here so I can kind of get this aligned better like this. Then I'm just going to click on that and I'm going to move it so that the smoke is like coming right out of this little smokestack right here. And then if we kind of zoom back out to fit here and I just kind of play it, now I have that smoke just kind of billowing out of the actual chimney in the background. And I think that that looks awesome. We're going to actually do a little bit more blending in a little bit, but right now just having that kind of smoke in the background is already a huge improvement. And now what I want to do is I actually want to put myself in front of this. So if I go back over here to my actual browser, I'm going to click on this video of me. Now this video of me is just kind of a random video. I'm just standing in my house and I'm just kind of like walking around, looking around, just kind of making it look like I'm just appreciating the scenery, okay? And so I'm just going to kind of like grab what part of this I actually want. So I think probably right about here where I'm just looking down like that. I'm going to hold down the Option key and I'm just going to trim it to that, so we'll bring that back. And then I'm also going to kind of go until I actually walk off the scene like that, just like that, and I'll trim it back to there too. Oh, and I trimmed it too far. So I want to be walking. Okay, and so this right here is going to be kind of the foreground video. So what I want to do is just kind of match all of these up to that length like this. And so now what I'm going to do is just apply the magnetic mask to this video so that I can basically just cut myself out of this video and composite myself into the other one. And so, like you've seen me do a million times here, I'm going to add a magnetic mask to this video clip. And then over here, I'm going to choose the actual subject in the frame. Let's see how well this does picking the subject, and it did really well. It basically selected me exactly as it should have. I'm gonna zoom in just a little bit here, and I'm gonna kind of like look around. I don't want it to have selected that right there, so I'm gonna select the minus here, and we're gonna just kind of put a minus there, so that's good. And then I'll kind of like come up here, just kind of look around and make sure. I want to make sure that it gets my glasses in there, so I'm going to choose the plus, and I'm going to choose the glasses. So make sure that it's actually selecting all of that stuff. And I think that looks pretty good. So go back to fit here, and then we're actually, now that I've actually got the mask selected the way that I want it, I'm just going to click on Analyze, and then it's going to go through the process of analyzing like it always does. Okay, now that it's analyzed, we can actually go through and see how it looks. So I'm going to click on there. So now you can see that I'm basically composited it into the scene here. And so I'm just going to kind of like skim through it here really quick and take a look and see how it looks. And it looks pretty good. I think I'm just going to kind of watch it through once really quick just to see how it looks. So there's a couple of spots that pop up. Just kind of watching to see like what it is, because I think there was just a couple of spots where I actually have to fix the mask a little bit. All right, cool. So there was a couple of spots back here. So it was basically, we're gonna just walk through this and look to see, oh, right there. I'm gonna zoom in here, move up to that, and then I'm just gonna use this tool. I'm going to use my subtraction tool here, and I'm going to kind of take that away so that it doesn't end up in the final mask. And then do the same thing here. And this should only have to happen, I think there were only a few frames where this happened, so it should not continue. Oh, there. And I'm just fixing these few frames so that the mask ends up looking good and I don't have to redo this. Okay, so that looks really good. Now I'm actually masked into this. I'm kind of composited into the scene here. And so I'm going to want to add some layers to this. So first of all, I'm going to want to put some snow in this scene. So we're actually going to need to mask one more thing, because I want snow to fall in the scene in a couple of layers, right? So I want snow to fall in front of the actual house. I want snow to fall between the house and between this car here. I want snow to fall between me and all of those things behind me, and then I want snow to fall in front of me. So I'm going to kind of put a few different layers of snow in here. So I need to use the magnetic mask one more time. So what I want to do is just kind of duplicate this bottom layer here, and on the top version of that, I'm going to use the magnetic mask on the car itself. So I'm just going to hide the layer of me and hide the smoke for a minute. And then when I click on that layer, I'm going to go over here to my magnetic mask. I'm going to add the magnetic mask to it. And then in here, I'm going to choose the car, and I don't want the actual piece of the house that's over here. So I just want to make sure that it's just the car that's selected, and it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect because you're not really going to see a lot of that. But basically the point here is I'm going to mask out the car so that some of the snow kind of falls behind the car. So now we've got this masked. I'm going to analyze this and just kind of let this go, and then we will actually add the snow and then the finishing touches on this. And now that that's analyzed, we can actually go over here, click done, so that it's just kind of sitting on top now, and there's another layer here. And now we can actually add the snow in. So if you go back to your generators and you click on Emberden, and then you pull that snowstorm down, we're gonna slip this between the two different scenes, and then I'm just gonna kind of drag it out so that it takes up the entire length of the clip, like that. And now you can see that there's actually snow falling in here, and it's too big right now. It doesn't look really that good, but there's snow falling in here, and we can see that it's kind of falling behind this car now, okay? And so that's good, that's what we want. So now I'm gonna actually scale this down even a little bit more. So instead of like 10%, I think I'm gonna go with like 6%, so that it's even smaller, which is good. And then I'm going to take the randomness down to about 3, so it's even a little less, because it looked like some of the flakes were just getting too big. So this will kind of be like the background snow that's kind of happening in the background. And if you play it, you can kind of see that it's falling and it's good, and that's great. Okay. And I'm going to just kind of bring the blur down a little. And let's just kind of experiment with the different snowflake shapes. I kind of think I might like Snowflake 2 better on that one, but let's check out Snowflake 3. Actually, I'm going to go with Snowflake 3. I think I like Snowflake 3 better for that back layer, like that. Okay. And then now we're going to actually bring another layer of snow, and we're going to put that between the smoke and the background, okay? And so we'll just kind of drag this out so it's the full length. And again, I'm going to scale this one down. I think I'll scale this one down to like 2%, and we'll go with 3 on the randomness there. And I think I might just kind of increase the birth rate a little bit, and we'll just kind of mess around with this, okay? We'll just toy with some of the different settings so that it's different than the one that's in front of it. You don't want it to be exactly the same. So we'll just kind of like lower that down. We'll make it maybe live a little bit longer, add a little more randomness in there, and we'll kind of slow that one down so it's falling at a different rate. And I think I actually want to adjust the scale of that one. I think I'm going to change this one to be Snowflake 2. And so now I want to bring the actual smoke video back in. So I'm going to hit V on that so that the smoke comes back. And I'm going to bring myself back into this. And let's see, let's take a look here. I'm going to want some snow to fall in front of me now. So I'm actually going to really quickly, just because we can kind of see that there's a little bit of an edge here, I'm just going to feather that back ever so slightly like that. That's pretty good. And then I'm going to drop some snow now in front of everything on top of me. So I'm going to take that snow, drop it up on the top layer up here, and we'll kind of pull this all the way out like this. And this snow is going to be kind of in the front of me. So I'm actually going to increase the blur on this so that it's much more blurred out. And I'm going to take the scale randomness down a little bit. And I'm going to just kind of toy with gravity a little bit. I'm going to make it so that it's not quite falling quite as fast as the other one. And like we did before, I'm just going to kind of like, you know, toy with some of these numbers and just make it a little bit different. And actually, I want the foreground ones to maybe not be as many. So the initial number, yeah, I'm going to kind of take that down. I'm just toying with some of these numbers, right? I just want to kind of make it so that it's a little bit different than the original. I think I make that 20, and then I'll kind of toy around with the randomness here. And so it's really just kind of adding different snowflakes on top of this, right? And so I'm just playing around with the numbers, trying to make it look a little bit different. I actually want the foreground ones to be very blurry. Like, I don't want them to have like an obvious shape. And I think Snowflake 1, I'm not a big fan of Snowflake 1. I think I'm just going to kind of take that one out and change it to something else. Maybe we'll try 2. Let's try 3. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with 3 there too. So I'm going to just kind of like watch that and see what it looks like. I'm going to change the scale of this one too. I'm just going to like make that maybe more like 4% and just kind of change the way that that looks. Yeah, I think that's looking actually pretty good for that one. So I'm just layering on different layers of snow here, okay? So I've basically got some snow that's kind of happening in the background between the car and the house. I've got some snow that's happening between the smoke and the house, right? It's just happening in different layers, and so it kind of adds to the realism. I think that, like, overall that looks pretty good. There's snow falling around me, it's falling in different layers, and so I think it looks pretty good. So I think that the last couple of things I'm gonna do is I'm gonna throw like a Ken Burns effect on here, where it kind of looks like the camera's kind of zooming in slowly a little bit to give it a little bit of motion. And then after that, I'm gonna add an adjustment layer to kind of change the colors a little bit and make it all kind of blend together. I'm actually going to go to my titles here, and I'm going to use a plugin that's created by Dylan Bates. It's a plugin called Pro Zooms, and future me is using this right now while I edit this video. So when you see those kind of zoom in and all that stuff on the screen and stuff, I'm doing it with this plugin. This plugin is awesome. But one of the cool things here is that it's got this Pro Burns effect, which kind of is like that. You can achieve the same thing with the built-in Ken Burns effect, but I just like the smoothness of this one and the way that it works. So I'm just going to drag that on top of here, and I'm just going to pull this across like this. So it's basically a title, and so if I click on it, it gives me this kind of region, right, that I can kind of move around, and I can decide where the actual zoom is going to happen, and I can kind of pull it out like this so I can decide where it's going to ultimately zoom to. So I think probably right about there is good. So I'm noticing that there's definitely still some snowflakes that are way too big in here. So I think that if I go down and I click on this one down here, right there, yeah, the scale is still 10% here, and I don't really want it to be that big. So I'm going to bring those down to maybe like 3%. And that actually resizes everything a little bit better, and I think it looks a lot more realistic. And so now I have these kind of snowflakes falling all around me, and the last thing that I want to do to this is I want to actually add an adjustment layer, and on that adjustment layer I'm just going to adjust the color a little bit so that it looks a little bit cooler and it kind of blends together a little better. So I'm going to use my own adjustment layer, and you can get my adjustment layer by going to my website. It's at emberdin.com, and you can download this adjustment layer for free for yourself. I'm going to go to my Emberdin titles here, and then I'm just going to drag the adjustment layer on the top, and I'm going to kind of pull this all the way to the end so that it covers the entire video. Now over here on the adjustment layer in these title parameters here, we can adjust some things. The only thing I'm going to adjust here is the colorize effect. So I'm going to actually enable colorize over here, and I'm going to change the color to be kind of more of like a cooler blue color like that. And then I'm going to change the black to also kind of map over to the cool blue over here like that. And then I'm just going to kind of adjust the mix a little bit on here so it just looks like it's kind of mixing with the blue, and it looks more like kind of a night scene like this. And now what I have is a finished version here that has all of the different elements. We now have a still image that has been brought to life and made dynamic. So I'm just going to render this out, add a little bit of music to it, kind of make it a little bit more dynamic, and then we'll check out the final product. And that's it. We did it. We created a dynamic moving image with snow and with smoke, and we added in some coloration, and we kind of made this simple still image into a dynamic and interesting scene. We were able to take Apple Motion and create some different effects within Apple Motion, and we were able to bring them into Final Cut Pro. Apple Motion and Final Cut Pro together are an amazing combination. You can create so many cool things with both of these pieces of software. And this project that we just created is a prime example of that. So I hope that you enjoyed doing this. I hope that you enjoyed this project. And if you thought that this one was cool, you should definitely check this one out.